Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Cobb, co founder of HBG Capital. And today I've got Krista on the show. She is a senior education content manager at Tenant. She creates data driven, actionable assets for over 500,000, that's 500,000 landlords across the country. They've got the tools and knowledge to be at the top of their game. She's been writing and editing for decades. She produces top quality content across multiple industries in real estate, SaaS, survey, you name it. Before we're going to get into her background a little bit, but before Tenant, she worked at the CE shop, editing scores, educational blogs, webinar, newsletters, ebooks. She's done a ton of stuff. I'm excited to jump in with her today. We're going to be talking about creating content, how to build lasting relationships with your tenants so you don't have turnover and you can make more money. Krista, welcome to the show.
Brandon, thank you so much. What a kind introduction. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun today. I'm excited about it. For those that don't know who you are, though, what is your story?
Absolutely. Well, I'd be surprised if folks knew who I was kind of up and coming. But taking you all the way back, I've always been a writer and a very curious person. So even as a young kid, I wanted to get out there, put words out into the mix. I was first published in a national magazine when I was like 8 years old. And I rode that high all the way to this point in my career, which has been really exciting. But it really got juicy in around 2013, 2015. I was in college and I was a very poor college student, was not able to get water for my ramen noodles, just eating those dry. So I looked at my skill set and I said, what can I do? What can I offer to people? How can I make some money? And I started my own freelance editing business. So I went out and I said, hey, I will edit anything you have. I'm going to be the cheapest in town. Bring me whatever you've got. So I got to edit things from like someone's 300-page zombie manuscript, their very first book, all the way to a business proposal for a luxury hotel in Jerusalem. And that business proposal changed my life. I really hadn't heard much about real estate before. It wasn't something that my family did or that, my folks were involved with. So getting to go through and see how somebody puts together a proposal and the potential return on investment for some kind of very luxurious property changed the game. And I got really curious about real estate after that. So as I
Okay.
continued working through and keeping my freelance editing business afloat, I tried to find more opportunities to just dive in further. And eventually that led me to working at the CE shop. The CE shop is a leading provider of real estate agent education. So it opened my eyes even further to say, oh gosh, okay, this is how we talk about buying and selling homes. This is what we have to teach people so that they can do it ethically and well. And this is how you can scale your business even further. And then an opportunity arose for me to really hone in on the investing side with landlords and property managements over at Tenant, where I work currently. And I jumped in with both feet. I've been here for a little over 2 years, loving every second of it, and excited to see what we do in the future.
Oh, man, that's so cool. What I love about what you do is the whole content creation. In my journey, I write a lot of content, have not always writing the content. I feel like you've got the left brain and right brain world, right? And over on one side, you've got the creatives that create amazing things. The imagination's big. And on the other side is, the rational, logical kind of spreadsheet sort of mind. That's mine. And so I was forced over into this imaginative creative world when I started having to write copy for social media and tell my story. And so it was a really great exercise. So I want to jump into this. I definitely want to get to how to build relationships with your tenants because that is I can't think of something more important right now in real estate. If you're in the rental market, if you're in multifamily or single family rentals, then making sure that you keep your current tenants because you've got to be really good at business right now to survive. There's a lot of distress in the multifamily world, in the commercial world. And part of that is the interest rate environment. And so every little bit that you can do to succeed helps in maintaining those tenants and keeping them happy to prevent that turnover, to keep your occupancy levels high. That is huge. So I want to get into that. But before we do, let's jump into this creative, imaginative content experience. What are some of the frameworks that have helped you become a better writer?
Great question. I would say first and foremost, being curious about things. If you are willing to sit down with a topic that you don't understand and start peeling back those layers, you will find so many different opportunities to not only foster a greater sense of understanding of that individual problem, but also how it fits into the larger system. So take emotional support animals. They're top of mind. I just did a webinar yesterday all about how to vet them, what they are, what they do, why they're important. That topic is so heated that it's really easy for landlords or investors to say, I just don't want to deal with it. It's too complicated. I don't want to get involved. I'll just turn a blind eye to those applications that come in with ESAs attached. And that's not the right way to go about it. But because there is so much confusion, it's natural for folks to just try to throw their hands up and say, ugh, I don't want to. But if you can instead turn that instinct to throw your hands up and really put them into the pot and say, okay, I'm going to get in here. I'm going to start with whatever piece makes the most sense to me. I know what an animal is. Let me figure out the emotional support part of this. And you just start looking up, relevant government websites, stories from people who have ESAs. You can start to build out the framework for what this means in the context of rental property management, and also how it fits into the broader American landscape. So it's really a question of how can you start and then start continuing to peel back those layers so you have something meaningful and that you can fully understand the topic at hand, because that enables you to find the best way to deliver that message. It all starts with the research and curiosity, though.
Okay, so starts with research and curiosity. That's a staple. Continue down this journey. What are some of the other frameworks and tools that have helped you become a better writer?
Reading for sure. I mean, you want to make sure that you're reading everything that you can, not even just about the topics that you have to research, right? Read everything from newspapers to other people's blog posts, opposing viewpoints. You really want to become a
Mm,
melting pot of information, because that gives you the most full context of what's actually going on and enables you to form an opinion about it. When you have
yeah.
an opinion about it, that comes through your writing, and people want opinion fueled pieces. They want data in there too. Absolutely. But if you don't have a unique voice, if there isn't something that you are saying that's different than anyone else, why
Right.
should they care about your content?
Yeah, no, I love that. One of the things that I read from an article, and it was from the creator of Albert. Albert's that cartoon in the newspaper, and he said, I can't remember what he said, but the concept was shorter is better. And I was
Mhm.
like, what do you mean shorter is better? And I started looking at a lot of the content that I was creating, and I was using a lot of filler words, like of and some of the stuff that didn't fit. And so now when I'm writing content, I'm constantly looking at, well, let me rephrase that. Every word has to earn the right to be on the page. When I started looking at it through that framework, every word has to earn the right to be on the page. I noticed how to make it simpler, how to make it more condensed. Because a lot of the reader, they want easy to digest information. And that was a game changer for me when I learned how to make those adjustments. The other was getting really good at storytelling. And when you know what storytelling is, a great way to start is learning how to tell your own story. And it's almost like you don't the mistake people make in their writing, I think, or at least I was making in my own writing, was I was telling people stuff and not showing them stuff. And so for me, when I was showing people stuff through my writing, that's when it really kind of lit up instead of just telling somebody. And so one of the unique ways that I learned to kind of do this content creation was I would go and I would try to write through the five senses. So when you're explaining something, right, what was the smell? What did you see? What did you hear? What did you feel? And so that really helped boost my content. Do you have any like ninja tricks or any little hacks that come to mind that have helped you kind of similar to that?
That is a really good ninja trick. I would say the first one that pops to mind is let your first draft be a mess. It doesn't have to be perfect out of the gate. It very rarely is. And to your point, succinctness is always going to be king. If you can tell a story in 50 words instead of 100, tell
Yeah.
it in. But it's okay to have a first draft that's 300 words. You just have to get really good at killing your darlings and figuring out which pieces you can cut, how you can better show things off versus telling them. I find data is really appropriate for that, especially in business writing. People want to say, okay, what are the figures behind this? How can I better understand this? And numbers are universally relatable. So when in doubt, pull out a data point. You can, if you can't find the data, create your own. Start surveying people. I think oftentimes folks feel like original research can be out of reach, especially if you're an individual creating content. It's not. It is out there. You can pull your family and friends. You can find communities online where they take these surveys, but be willing to throw everything into that first draft, including these data points, and then let it sit whenever possible. I think it's a best practice to give your draft some time to breathe. That way you can come back to it with fresh eyes. I realize that timelines do not always accommodate that kind of plan, but you would be surprised at how much better your second draft will be if you give your first draft a day or two to sit, and you can come back and say, all right, I can cut 70% of this, and the true heart of my message is in that 30% that's left behind. So let's refine it one more time and get it out the door.
Yeah. Do you find that your creative juices are flowing at one particular time of day or night?
For me, it's typically the morning.
Yeah.
So I like to try and crank out as much writing as possible then. That also works because, let's say I'm on a tight timeline. I can write something in the morning, give it
Yeah.
some space to breathe for a few hours, and come back in the afternoon and hopefully button it up, get it to where it needs to be. What about you? When
Yeah.
is your creative juice most likely to
So
flow?
same thing morning and like Friday mornings. And that was one of the things that I wanted because when I was trying to write at the end of the day, when I'd just been blasted, like my dopamine is depleted. I need a lot of focus in order for me to be able to create content. And it has to be the morning because if I try to write content at the end of the day when I'm shot, I'm brain dead. I get frustrated because nothing's coming out. And that's just this bad kind of little spiral where I get so frustrated. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 3 hours and nothing's coming out. Whereas if I can start banging it out in the morning and I've got like a framework, I got a little framework that I follow, with ideas and stuff. But Friday morning, because Friday's kind of like, all right, there's some excitement there. The weekend's sort of here. Fridays are kind of my easy day for the week. I stack all my important stuff at the beginning of the week. And if I accomplish it, I'm usually feeling good at the end of the week and I can really focus on the content. So for me, it's the morning time, but I know it's different for a lot of people. So it's, pick whatever time of the day or night. I've got friends 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, who stays up that late? That's when for some reason they're at their prime. And I can't tell you why, but yeah, that's definitely my time. You write so many different types of content, blogs, articles, email, social media, and each one has its own unique style. What are some of the nuances with the different content and maybe some like uh-ohs that people need to watch out for there?
Every single channel is different. You're right. Every single different avenue is going to have requirements that you need to follow, and also audiences have different expectations. So when it comes to something that's more long form, like an ebook, I can go wild. I love ebooks. Personally, I struggle to be succinct. That is something I'm always working on as a writer and an
Yeah.
editor. So in an ebook format, you still need to be very clear about your messaging, but I can really link out to all of my sources. I can make sure that there are illustrations to back up what I'm saying. And I really enjoy that piece. You also have to think more about formatting in an ebook style because most folks don't want to just sit down and have a page full of text. They want bullet points, they want pictures, they want graphs. So I approach those in a more data-driven route, but really relish in the fact that I get to produce quite a bit of copy as well. Versus something like a social media post, you're limited to a very specific number of characters. And if you can't get them hooked with those very specific characters, they're just going to scroll on by and they will not pay you any mind. Also, social media tends to be more emotion based. So getting something in that hook that's either a really interesting stat or something that's going to make someone pause and engage, it's likely going to be driven by what they're feeling. So having a good understanding of each of the individual social media platforms is really important too. We have a wonderful social media strategist who I often partner with for exactly that reason, because folks on Instagram want to see something different than folks on LinkedIn and folks on Facebook. So getting to know your audience and paying attention to what performs well and keeping notes of that empowers us to continue producing that kind of great content and refining the strategy over time.
I love what you said. You know who your avatar is, who you're going after, write content for that, and split test, make it emotional. What's working, what's not, pay attention, and try to generate more content around what was working. It was funny. We noticed that content that was like more personal. Like I had some old photos of me in like scrubs back in my medical device sales days, photos of me like holding a book and giving like book lessons. There was something about those posts in particular, especially when it's like about a personal journey. Those for some reason do really, really well. So we tried to start doubling down and doing more content. Are you noticing that certain content on social media does better than other content?
Absolutely. So taking you back about a year or two ago before we had our current social media strategist. Um, on Instagram, we largely just posted flat statistics. They were designed, they looked beautiful, but there wasn't any motion, there wasn't any emotion. So they just kind of sat and there wasn't a lot of engagement. I actually remember talking to my director of marketing and saying, Jonathan, I don't think businesses can succeed in the social media game in the same way that they did when we first started these platforms, right? Like I think it's too saturated. Well, lo and behold, what you need to do is really crack the code and figure out how can we get more people in the mix. So now with our social media strategist, it is very much people based. She is in almost every video. If she's not in the video, I'm in the video, and we are communicating with people where they're at and imbuing plenty of humor along the way. She calls it relatable cringe, which makes me laugh every single time. But grabbing memes and grabbing things that are currently in the zeitgeist that people are excited about or even have any kind of strong feeling about and adapting that for your audience for what they are interested in, it works wonders. And we've seen our numbers really skyrocket since taking that approach.
Relatable cringe. I love that. I'm going to steal that relatable cringe. So again, you're bringing emotion from it. It sounds like is the main thing that you're trying to generate from these posts.
Exactly. So it's emotion and education going hand in hand, but also saying, hey, we can take kind of a cheeky look at what it means to be a landlord in 2024, because there are plenty of memes out there that are going to tie back
Yeah.
to what we're experiencing. And people love to have that moment of self-recognition. They want to laugh and say, oh, yeah, I also have had this experience. Or like, gosh, this reminds me of my friend Jim, who just told me about this at the local RIA. So
Yeah.
it comes easier, but it's definitely a practice. You need to keep going and you need to be willing to make mistakes and have posts that flop, same as you would with any other channel, but on the stage of social media where you can be ridiculed. Gotta.
Yeah. I love that. All right. So kind of transitioning here, I want to get into the tenant stuff. So what's that content look like? I guess these are like relatable stories like, oh my God, my tenant stopped paying me, and then a story around that, or oh my gosh, I can relate to the fact that the tenant just destroyed the place, or oh my gosh, I'm having to get new tenants every single year, and the turnover is costing me money, and the vacancies. Is that kind of what it is? You're looking for those relatable experiences and creating content around that?
Absolutely. Really keen on pulling in relatable stories, things that, most landlords experience or have heard about, but
Yeah.
also sure that we shine a light on places where landlords and tenants are getting along great.
Yeah.
In my research, I found that although there is significant stigma around being a landlord, when you ask individuals to rate each other, the landlord and the tenant usually give each other at least a 4.4 out of 5 every single time.
Yeah.
It means that there are really healthy relationships out there. We just don't hear about them because they don't evoke the same emotion as someone who says, "Oh my gosh, my tenant lit my house on fire and now everything's in smoke."
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a buddy out in the Midwest who yeah, they had a tenant stop paying in a mobile home, and they evicted them, and they said, no, I stopped paying, but I don't care. If you don't let me back in the house, I'm gonna burn it down. And they did.
That's
Straight up. Set it on
intense.
fire, burned it to the ground, and they ended up going to jail. But I was blown away by that. Okay, so there's a lot of people that have tenants, a lot of people that want to get into the rental game, a lot of people that want to get in the multifamily game. What can landlords do to build long-lasting relationships with their tenants? The goal here is to keep them, make them happy. You want to select good tenants, all that. But let's say we've selected the good ones. How do you keep them? What goes into that relationship?
Yeah, first remember that rental property management is a human first business. When you're dealing with someone's housing, it's a lot different than dealing with just cold money and cash and facts and figures. So that doesn't mean that you have to be a pushover, but approaching conversations with empathy and remembering that you're working with the tenant, not against them, is going to help set you up for success. I would also say being very clear about your expectations, right? So making sure that tenants know when it's appropriate to reach out to you for things and when it's something that, maybe they let you know in passing, but it's not a big emergency. Let's take a common maintenance situation. Like people usually complain about someone calling at 11 p.m. for a light bulb change, right? And we can kind of laugh at that. That seems very silly. But if it's a big deal to your tenant, what I would recommend is saying, hey, I hear you. I appreciate that you're reaching out. In the future, reach out to me for light bulb changes between the hours of 8 and 3 p.m., and we will find someone to take care of you. But by helping them to understand when it's appropriate to engage you in the ways that you want to be engaged, it helps streamline the relationship, because then they don't feel frustrated that you're ignoring them or not taking them seriously. And you don't feel frustrated because they're not knocking down your door for something that you might think is really silly. On the other hand, you want to make sure that they understand, what are the big situations in which you want to be notified right away. These are going to be things that protect your property. So if there's a leak, for example, that's not something you want to wait till the next day to figure out. But making sure that they understand this is critical. So start it off at the very beginning of your relationship when it comes to signing your lease. Leases are big. They are kind of overwhelming. So have them be as robust as possible. But I would also recommend having a separate sheet that just outlines top bullet points about communication, respect of the property, expectations for cleanliness, things that you have in your lease agreement, but stripped away of all the legalese so that everybody has the chance to understand it and ask questions. I would
How do you, sorry, go ahead.
I would just say too, be open to having people ask questions. I know sometimes folks are not super comfortable with the communication aspect with tenants, but if you're going to be a landlord or a rental investor, being willing to have even awkward conversations is really going to fuel your success and empower you in the long term.
Biggest problem. Nobody reads those big booklet leases that outline all the duties and responsibility. Nobody got time to read that kind of stuff. They're just reading, okay, here's the deposit, here's the amount. So I agree with you. Setting the expectation up front is so important. If you can do that, you can eliminate so much headache. Nobody does that. And we live in a world where everything's done online. Property managers aren't showing up a lot of times to show the property. There's a code, you get the code, you upload your ID now. It's getting the point where it's how do we remove human beings from the whole process and automate it? That's where it's going. How are you guys walking every new tenant through the process and setting the proper expectations so that that relationship can start off on the best foot? Because it's like dating, right? Like, in dating, you on that first date and you're like, hey, I want kids. I'm religious, right? Kind of you go through some of the deal breakers for you so that you don't get married and be like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work out.
Right.
But no one's doing that in the landlord world. No one's doing that in the property management world. How are you guys doing that?
So I love the dating and marriage analogy. Let's keep it running. I would say first, when it comes to tenant screening, that is the dating phase, right? You have your set list of criteria. I would urge you separately to make sure that that's written down so that you have it for your records. But you have your set list of criteria. You're finding someone who's going to best align with as much of it as possible. So you find your date. And then when you decide, okay, we're going to make this official, we're going to sign a lease, then you need to make sure that along the way, you are communicating whatever you can to ensure that you both are on the same page. We facilitate that here at Turbo Tenant by embedding tips into our software. So when you go through and you're like going through the tenant selection phase, we have things like, hey, remember that you can't discriminate against people with emotional support animals. Here's more information. Here's education to help you approach this kind of nuanced topic while abiding by the Fair Housing Act. So you get your tenant, they're screened, you have your lease, you're really excited about it. We help produce state-specific lease agreements so that you can feel confident that you're complying with the law. It also gives you a chance to make sure that you understand what you can and cannot ask of your tenant. We also have some free content that helps with that too. So I produce something called the Welcome Home Guide, which inherently is just a document that allows you to outline your expectations for tenants. You can write out specifically, again, when you want them to contact you. Also, I included some basic maintenance tips for like the toilet running and not stopping, or, how do you find the fuse box? That way it can still be online. We can still have this combination of people kind of stepping out while producing top quality services for their tenants. So trying to give folks the tools that make it really easy to have a good relationship from the base. You sign that contract, now you're married, that you're partnered, but that doesn't mean that you just ignore your partner, right? And truly, your tenant is a business partner. So to keep that alive, what I recommend is just making sure you put forth a bit of effort. It doesn't have to be everything. It doesn't even have to be costly. But if you can take a note of when their birthday is and you send them a card, or maybe you even send them a gift card to a local restaurant, that is going to do wonders because it helps them feel like you care. Another way to show that you care is being really responsive. So again, if you have maintenance requests coming in, TurboTenant has an all-in-one portal where a tenant could just let you know, attach pictures of whatever's going wrong, all the details, their availability, etc. If you respond to that sooner than the law dictates you have to, and you just keep them in the loop every step of the way, you are going to have so much of a better relationship because you're making someone feel heard and appreciated. And that's what we all want at the end of the day, no matter what kind of relationship you're having.
So you're uploading kind of that, hey, let's filter the lease agreement, right, to some checklist points, uploading that to the portal or sending it to them and say, hey, just let you know, here's the stuff you're responsible for. Here's when you need to reach out to us. Here's what to expect. Here's some commonly frequently asked questions. And here's some like misconceptions or like the biggest headaches we see our tenants face because they just don't know that we don't take care of these things. So, hey, heads up, we're not going to do these things. Just be aware of it. Is that right?
Yep, exactly.
What are some of the, man, you said something there a second ago, like some of the biggest things that landlords don't know they can't do?
Mm, there are several. I mean, going back to tenant screening, disability, things of that nature,
Yeah.
oftentimes people don't realize that they're violating the Fair Housing Act and they do it unintentionally, right? Um,
There's the questions they can't ask. That's what it was. Sorry. You keep going.
Exactly. No, no, but that's exactly the realm, is that there are questions you can't ask, and there are also things that you just can't do. So oftentimes when we think about someone discriminating, we think it's something very purposeful. They are being malicious. They are saying no to this specific group of people. But discrimination can also look like making a decision for someone else based on a protected class that they didn't want you to make for them. It's still their decision. So the example I usually use is, let's say that you have a third floor walk up and you get a lead who is in a wheelchair, and you say, oh, I'm not going to even bother showing them this house because it's a third floor walk up and they can't walk. You might think that you're in the right and that you're doing the right thing because there's not a logistical way to make it happen in your framework. However, by robbing them of the choice, you are discriminating, but you might not think
Huh.
that you're doing that, because you're trying to act with a good heart, trying to make sure that they are being taken care of, but you're going
Right.
about it the wrong way. So you've got to be careful and make sure that you are really familiar both with your local laws, but also with the Fair Housing Act as a whole. And that will help guide most of the interactions, most of the times that there are questions you can and can't ask of tenants.
Interesting. I like that. Okay. So any other questions that you see that are popular that people don't know that they can't ask?
Ooh, you know, yes, I would say anything to do with the seven protected classes nationally, you should tread carefully.
Okay.
Protected classes are going to be things like disability, country of origin, race, sex, etc. Um, and if you have a question, particularly about disability, because the nexus here is, if someone has a service animal and you're like, hey, but are you really disabled? That's such a bad question. Don't ask that question. You cannot ask that question. What you can do is know your rights and request the proper documentation. Absolutely. But make sure that you're going about it in an empathetic, kind way. And when in doubt, talk to a friend or a lawyer or someone in a local RIA group before you ask those questions of your tenants. They should steer you away from making that kind of blunder.
Love it. Those are great. Yep. Game changer right there. For those that want to learn more about you, learn more about Turbo Tenants services, learn more about being a better landlord, maybe check out some of this awesome content that you guys put out for the landlords out there, where can they go?
So head on over to turbotenant.com. You can explore all of our features, from marketing your rental, finding tenants, screening tenants, all of which is free for landlords. And you can also enjoy our content over there. So again, we have a monthly webinar program. We produce blogs left, right, and center. They are always coming out. And we have plenty of videos too. So we hope to see you there. And if you have questions, you can reach out directly to me at Krista@turbotenant.com.
I love it. Krista, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Brandon. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and hey, and if you got value from this episode, show Krista some love, show me some love, share this with your friends and family, leave us a review, like, and share. We'll see you guys next time.